Pittsburgh's Underground Railroad history boasts a black community that worked together and communicated very well. It was called the Vigilance Committee and was a part of a larger network across Pennsylvania with free black community leaders in larger cities like Philadelphia, including the well-known William Still. It's estimated that more than 100,000 escaped slaves came through Pittsburgh between 1820 and 1860. Many kept on north. However, a good number of runaways made Pittsburgh their home over those 40 years. Pittsburgh's black runaway ancestors came mostly from North and South Carolina, as well as likely from some parts of Virginia. During this time, there were several safe spaces up and down the Monongahela River on both sides of the banks leading to the Ohio. And Pittsburgh's free black community offered a safe haven for those escaping enslavement. There were places of resource downtown and spread up the hills. Free blacks worked as servants, but also were utilizing lots of other skills as laborers and entrepreneurs. Free blacks, or African Americans in Pittsburgh, generally speaking, were progressive and owned more successful businesses than we do today. They were extremely organized in their anti-slavery activities and had positive relationships with some whites, especially a few influential ones, be it that most whites were apathetic to black issues specifically. Most weren't looking to get involved, as it was illegal and with great consequence, especially after the passing of the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850. Downtown Pittsburgh had several businesses that served as stations on the Underground Railroad. As a refugee from slavery, you could effectively come out of hiding in the bush after weeks of arduous, unsafe travel, meet up with a Vigilance Committee member like John Vashon, who lived in what we know as the Hill District, and owned a high-profile bathhouse and barbershop downtown. He was one of the richest black men in Pittsburgh and could be counted on to help clean up, clothe, and house those black folks seeking freedom from the South. Free black residents in Hymietown, which comprised Uptown, Oakland, and the Hill District, were known to provide food, resources, and opportunities for escaped slaves to blend in and find occupation, a home, and community. On the other side of the river, ancestors could scale the mountain following Indian trails up to Mount Washington. But back downtown, located on Smithfield and Water Street, was the Monongahela Hotel and Merchant House. Pittsburgh was a port city, and the slave owners and other white businessmen would sell their wares and talk money and business at this establishment. Black folks working in these places would be privy to a lot of information and could share it quickly. Many of them were secretly active in anti-slavery activities and the Underground Railroad. One example in the Pittsburgh Daily Gazette in 1847 reports the story of the enslaved Daniel Lockhart, who escaped Virginia to Pittsburgh and found refuge working at the Monongahela Hotel. History tells us that Lockhart was recaptured by his slave master Joseph Logan and his 2 white aides, planning to put him on a steamboat up the Ohio River. Word of the capture reached the black community in Arthurville, what we now know as the Lower Hill District today. The community of black freedom fighters surrounded the would-be kidnappers. The story was that Logan had tricked Daniel Lockhart into coming to his hotel room, but Lockhart had began yelling and a crowd gathered. A scuffle broke out with Lockhart somehow escaping into the crowd, and Logan and his 2 accomplices were arrested. The community had kidnapping charges brought against the 3 white men, and representing the community in prosecuting the 3 was prominent white attorney Thomas J. Bingham. Interestingly enough, the 3 white men were actually found guilty, but they jumped bail and fled south before they could be sentenced. into wealth and built his Woodlawn Woods home in what is now Chatham Village next to Olympia Park in Mount Washington. Bingham had a number of white and black servants working for him, one of which was a black woman named Lucinda Bryant, the family nurse for his 2 oldest sons. Today we've coined these woods behind the Bingham house Lucinda's Woods. The Bingham house was a safe house in the woods on their family's own private property, though others would often pass through. He kept it patrolled for years during and after the Civil War. Bingham was known as the Sage of Mount Washington. However, the true heroism belongs to Lucinda. The story is that she would retreat to the attic when a stranger came to visit the house, which alludes to the high possibility that she had escaped from a southern plantation herself. Lucinda took on the responsibility of being a watchwoman for other refugees that had ran from the undeniable hell of enslavement into the dangers of the unknown swamps and woods to secure their freedom in another unknown place in America. Lucinda would place a lantern on the porch or sometimes in the window to let folks hiding in the hillsides know it was safe to approach the house. She and others would allow runaways to hide in the crawl space under the Bingham house or in the attic, sometimes in other buildings on the Bingham property not being used. It's important to note the geography of our area. The rivers and the tributaries that stream through the landscape offered hiding places in caves and in woods, as well as provided wild foods that could be foraged for nourishment. Wild grapes, sumac, apples, poke salad, berries, wild onion, and other natural forms of flora and fauna were edible and helped in the survival of our ancestors. Think about what it was like traveling through the woods. How did the ancestors do it? If you were in a small group, your scout would move ahead of the group to make sure it was safe and to check things out in a clearing, to see in all directions and points, using the sun and stars. Most times, this travel was at night. When runaways were caught, punishment was strict and brutal. Slave catchers would return slaves to their owners, sometimes selling them further downriver, and they could often face even worse punishment: castration, slow starvation, or hanging. Making the decision to seek freedom was worth it for most who tried. These woods are sacred to us because of the history held in them. Hiding by day, running by night. Hiding by day, running by night, and praying, praying, praying. Dispossessed Africans did together for themselves what the segregated state would not. The Underground Railroad was an early example of black informal cooperative economics, plotting and planning the escape away from the plantation, sharing food, clothing, and other resources, and overall working together to hide, travel, and survive station to station along the path north to freedom, and even later collectively raising money to buy someone else's freedom. Today, we, the descendants of enslaved Africans, abolitionists, and freedom lovers, again exercise our right of self-determination by traveling one of the paths that our ancestors traveled in their journey to freedom from enslavement. We use our symbols of food, the staff, the drum, and buttons to symbolize their courageous journey. Be it known and agreed that this sacred land shall be known now and forever as Heritage Park, and this path as Ancestor Trail. All in agreement signify by saying Ashe. In keeping with the tradition, let us continue purposefully to our destination and remove ourselves from this place and vow to reconvene again next time and to never forget. Ashe.